Alright, so I'm Justin,
I'm Chase.
I'm Liz.
and we're going to be talking about military drones. First off, we're going to begin with the basic facts. How many of you guys know what a drone is? Alright, so a lot of you. A drone is an unmanned aerial vehicle, or a UAV, and these vehicles are remotely controlled and can transmit data back to their ground operators. Drones can come in all different sizes. They can range from really small to go into places where regular human soldiers cannot enter. And they would assist in search and rescue missions that are especially dangerous for regular soldiers. Or they can also be very large, where they would be flying around an area and taking surveillance, or even be used to terminate targets. As of now, drones are primarily used by the United States military as a form of defense.
So to talk about our issue, we first want to talk about who it affects. To fully understand the controversy, we thought it would be best to outline the different stakeholders. So by definition, a stakeholder is a group, organization, or member of a system who affects or can be affected by an issue. The three stakeholders we're going to talk about today are the government, the pilots of the drones, or the people who are controlling them, and the civilians in the areas where the drones are being used. The issue is a big controversy right now because while the government has already implemented the use of drones in foreign affairs, many people are against it. People argue that the use of drones in war have extremely negative effects on the civilian populations of the areas. Additionally, in terms of the drone pilots, or people who are remotely controlling the drones, the use of drones can cause the pilots to become dehumanized to the reality of war, despite the different responsibilities and actions among an ordinary soldier and a drone pilot. Many people have also brought up the issue that they feel that drones are an inhumane excuse for defense that also can breach privacy policies. So the first stakeholder that we're going to talk about is the United States government. The reason we thought they were a primary stakeholder to discuss is because they're the group that's, as of right now, primarily responsible for putting the drones to use. For the United States military, drones are used as a means of security and defense against possible terrorist attacks. The military has increased the use of drones over recent years, and many government officials claim that the use of drones allow for more accurate attacks that aim to prevent possible terror attacks. According to a recent issue of Foreign Affairs, one of the main pros for military use of drones is their effectiveness, and this seems to be the main pro in terms of the government as a stakeholder. The first known drone strike was on November 4th, 2002, when a CIA missile launched from a drone killed 6 suspected Al-Qaeda members. Since then, the drones have successfully prevented possible terrorist attacks on the United States. Daniel Byman, a professor of the Security Studies program at Georgetown, claims that drones are the best means of defense in terms of national security, he claims that all other alternatives are either too expensive or too risky. Drones, first and foremost, are extremely accurate. Some even argue that they are more accurate than any ground troops or conventional pilots. Targets can be viewed for weeks prior to an attack, which makes them therefore easily identified. Because the operators of drones are able to have an accurate idea of the suspect, they are able to plan an attack which takes advantage of the exact right moment. This accuracy in position and attack greatly reduces the risk of unnecessary deaths. Missiles can even be diverted in a situation if it becomes unsafe after the missile has already been launched. Basically, this means that, in theory, if a missile were to be launched at a target and a child were to come into that where the target was going to go, the missile could be diverted after, as to prevent unnecessary deaths and hitting an unplanned target. Secondly, as mentioned by Daniel Byman, drone operations are inexpensive in comparison to other forms of defense. According to the 2012 defense budget, approximately $5 billion went towards drones. Now, I know this seems like a lot, but it's actually only about 1% of the entire annual military budget. When you compare this to the reported $9.7 billion spent on the military's Joint Strike Fighter program, it's impossible to disregard drones as financially appealing. One of the other pros claimed by the United States government is the lack of man-to-man combat that drones allow for, which helps to increase the safety of the United States troops, which is something the government claims everybody can stand for. As soldiers are killed in overseas combat every day, the increased use of drones helps to limit the further injury and death of our soldiers. While the practices of the government will always be in question, the pros of drones are that they are considered to be the lesser of many evils in terms of national defense. While drone strikes still produce accidental casualties, it's claimed that the ratio is much less than it is for other known effective forms of attack. Drones maximize the government's ability to keep up with defense overseas while limiting the number of soldiers physically deployed. So this leads for advantages in the budget, and it also allows for the government to focus on other areas that need attention. So the drones can serve essentially as the eyes and ears of the United States, which means our government can spend their time on other operations, which is one of the means for controversy because people feel that that's possibly violating privacy laws. As countries spend more money into developing new military technologies, it is impossible for the United States to stay. It is important for the United States to stay on the forefront of technology and innovation. The established drone program allows for monies to be allocated into new programs that will continue to find ways of national security that will hopefully hold up as other countries are also gaining interest in drones. It is estimated now, as of now, that 87 countries already own some type of surveillance or attack drone. And for the military to stop the use of drones may cause the United States to have a disadvantage in this particular field. While the positive outcomes of government drones are significant, they don't paint the whole picture, and it's important to evaluate all stakeholders in this situation before arriving upon a conclusion about the controversy. Once each stakeholder has been evaluated, it can be determined whether if overall drones hold gains or loss for everybody. So the next stakeholder we're going to talk about is the operators and the machines themselves.
Military drones were created in the hopes of saving more of our soldiers' lives. Drones have been extremely successful in reaching this objective because drones and other military robots have been used in combat to replace soldiers in high-risk situations. According to Paul McCleary, a writer for the Military Times, the Army is already on a path to shrink from 540,000 soldiers to about 490,000 by the end of 2015. And this number will likely slide further to 420,000 by 2019. That's over 100,000 soldiers that will be removed from the battlefield in 5 years. There's no doubt that drones are beneficial to the nation, but however, there are also many negative effects of drones as well. From a military standpoint, this step toward mechanical soldiers seems logical. This is because robots can't get tired and they can perform tasks that are much too risky for human soldiers. However, McCleary tells us that even remote control has its limitations. Communications between the system and the operator can take a few seconds that in turn can decide a mission's success or failure. A situation on the battlefield can turn around in these few seconds. A civilian could appear, or the target might even surrender, but by then it would be too late due to this delay. The satellite link between the drone and the drone operator has other repercussions as well. A drone can't make a decision like a human pilot flying an F-16 can. According to an article in The Economist, militants can jam the signal from the drone and its operator, causing the drone to revert to preloaded software and GPS guidance, which can be problematic on complex missions. On the other hand, a pilot on a manned jet can take immediate action while a drone cannot. The use of drones in battle also dehumanizes the reality and the horrors of war. Drones make it seem easier to take a life, and they remove the personal aspect of each kill. Jennifer Robinson, a London-based human rights lawyer, tells us that the US authorities use the term bug splat to refer to humans killed by drone missiles. This is a term that's also used in video games. Since the drone operator does not have to be there in person to kill his target, there's little sense of attachment between him and his target. This detachment from the battlefield is an ethical issue as well, according to George Monbiot, a writer for The Guardian. He says that since drones make war easier and less risky, attacks by drones are more likely to take place, and there is a much higher chance of combat. If there were actual armed troops on the ground, there would be fewer attacks and less conflict between the two forces. Tom Engelhardt, a fellow at the Nation Institute, which is a nonprofit media center, he marks that first came professional war, then privatized war, then mercenary war and outsourced war, all of which made war ever more remote from most Americans. Finally, both literally and figuratively, came remote war itself. He maps out the evolution of the war starting from the Vietnam War, where the soldiers were paid volunteers, to today, the remote war era, where wars are literally carried out by war machines. These machines do remove our soldiers from danger, but at what cost? The drones take lives at a higher rate than our soldiers ever did because of how easy it is to take lives. There's less risk when our soldiers aren't on the battlefield themselves, so there's nothing holding us back from taking more attacks. Not only this, but the drone operators are detached from their kills, so they treat it like a video game. War is a terrible thing, and there's not really any best option, but it should not be treated like a game. And the next stakeholder that we're going to be talking about is civilians.
Alright, so although drones are claimed to be accurate and effective by the government, the aspect of civilian casualties have drawn much attention in recent years. Despite the fact that drones keep soldiers out of harm's way, drones have a negative effect on innocent lives, as what Justin was saying earlier. Overall, I believe that the drone program should be reevaluated due to the three aspects shown on this slide, which are the loss/injury of life, the psychological impact on the civilians, as well as the moral issues involved. First off, let me address the numbers involved with civilian casualties. So drone strikes have been responsible for affecting civilian populations mostly in Somalia, Yemen, and Pakistan. According to an article produced by Columbia Law School, as of August 2012, about 60 civilians were killed in Somalia, 66 in Yemen, and 900 in Pakistan. Now you may be thinking these civilian casualties are minuscule or don't seem so bad. Well, yes, I also agree that these numbers may seem small, but there's an important thing to note when it comes to these numbers. And that is that these numbers can never be exact, since drone strikes often take place in areas that are inaccessible or unsafe for outsiders to come in and account for all these casualties. There's also a judgment aspect involved when distinguishing a militant, which is another word for a bad guy, from a civilian. Depending on who is assessing the situation, there may be different numbers that are recorded due to this blurred line of civilian and militant. So what I'm trying to say here is that drone strikes may be doing much more damage than we may think. In fact, according to another study done by Stanford Law School and New York University School of Law, only 2% of those killed by drones are high-level targets, or in other words, targets that pose the most threat to the United States. That's 2%, which is extremely low. The other 98%, I believe, are killed due to the approach the government takes when using drones. The government often uses the guilty by association approach, and this approach holds the assumption that all people that come into close contact with identified militants are also enemies. This is seen in what are known to be as double tap strikes, where a drone carries out a second attack on an area. Now if you don't understand what I mean by this, the way that this goes is that after an initial strike on like an area or a building, family members of the victims, as well as emergency responders, naturally go to that area or that same site where the strike occurred, and this large gathering of people around that same site that had been previously fired upon makes the drone pilots or government believe that those people are also enemies. Therefore, a second strike is carried out. When the second strike hits, these people are also killed or injured. Additionally, drones have been known to fire on funeral processions. Funeral processions are highly populated religious events that are intended to mourn the life of one that has moved on. Now for me, this does not agree with my morals, but what I also got from this is that the drones often fire upon whomever they want, and in the end it seems that more civilians than militants are being killed. There are many stories when it comes to drones and how they've affected the lives of people, but I will share with you some stories that I felt were the most devastating in terms of what the victim had lost. Let me also say that these stories are obtained from articles and websites that focus on sharing what it is like to live under drones. The first story is about a boy named Sadullah. Sadullah is a teenager who, after a drone strike, lost 3 of his family members, both of his legs, and the vision in one of his eyes. In response to this incident, Sadula says, quote, "I wanted to be a doctor, but I can't walk anymore. When I see others going to school, I wish I could join them." End quote. As you can see, being injured by a drone is often devastating on its own, as the injuries often make the life of the victim permanently harder. Also, not only has he been injured, but he also lost 3 of his family members. In the second incident, Shaquille Khan reports the experience he had with the drone strike. He says, quote, "I was resting with my parents in one room when the drone hit. God saved my parents and I, but my brother, his wife, and children were all killed. I must support my aged parents now, but I earn a very little amount which can hardly pay for the expenses." End quote. In the many areas targeted by drone strikes, families often live off of low earnings and are supported by a single person, so in the event that this person is killed, the remaining family members must sacrifice much more to make up for the loss. A last story that I'd like to share shows that drones sometimes leave victims with nothing. Usman Wazir lost his family in addition to his home. Left with no family members or a roof above his head, he sleeps at the local mosque. So for this overall argument, if we readdress the subject that involves the total number of civilians killed, we see that the U.S. government seems to be avoiding the task of confirming the outcome of the drone strikes. Innocent human lives are concerned here, and the government does not have the decency to confirm or take responsibility for their actions. This makes the United States seem like we do not care about how many lives are lost and collateral damage, but as long as the main targets are killed, we have nothing to worry about. Furthermore, it can also be supported that the United States are firing upon targets off of pure assumptions as seen with the guilty by association approach and double tap strikes. Since when has it been reasonable to label someone an enemy just because he or she associates him or herself with a known enemy? Also, unnecessary lives are being lost in the double tap strikes. These strikes kill those who are trying to help victims of the first strike, which most likely include medical first responders and family members. Do these second victims deserve such a thing? They lose their lives if they're trying to help others, which is ridiculous. Finally, if we remember the victims of the stories I told you, these people have no one to blame and receive no compensation whatsoever. Now, with the numbers, deaths, and injuries aside, when it comes to the psychological impact, it's important to know that drones fly above target areas 24/7. The sound of the drones keep civilians awake at night and drive people crazy. In comparison to where death or injury may affect one person or one family at most, drones psychologically affect the whole community since everyone is able to see or hear the drones. Children are often kept at home from school since their parents fear for their child's safety. For us in the United States, we often see or hear helicopters or planes flying above in the sky, but we think nothing of it. Imagine how that would change if these aerial vehicles could shoot down upon you, your family, or friends. Surprisingly, going back to the stakeholder that Justin addressed, which was drone pilots also experience psychological stress when using drones. Drone pilots often see the impact of the missile and watch their targets blow up in front of their eyes. Studies have shown that although pilots and ordinary soldiers have different responsibilities on the battlefield, drone pilots also experience post-traumatic stress disorder. If drone pilots who are on the side of the drones themselves are experiencing negative effects, then it should be clear that something is wrong with the use of drones. In conclusion, drones have ravaged the communities within the countries of Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, and many more. Many have lost their lives, and those lucky enough to keep their lives are often physically injured, left in poverty, or psychologically damaged. Drone policies at the moment are unreasonable, and the government seems to have no concern for the well-being of civilians. These policies must be readdressed and changed. After all, our country was built upon a foundation that valued justice and humanity, which seem to have disappeared in this day and age of drones. We must make sure that every civilian in any country around the globe never loses sight of that essential view of the United States. So after hearing Liz talk about the government, Justin talk about drone pilots, and myself that talked about civilians, Justin and I believe that the use of drones is a negative thing, while Liz and the government believe it's a good thing. So overall, since Justin and I are kind of against Liz in this, we believe that the use of drones we should not use drones in the future. So this is our service, but a solution that I found or discovered when doing research is that in a foreign affairs scholarly paper, author Sarah Howinski addresses the shortcomings of the United States government and proposes several changes that can help improve the drone crisis. First and foremost, she addresses that in all forms of war, it is up to the government to make it a policy to make civilians a top priority. Congress must also enact certain laws that involve civilian compensation. In terms of current drone policy, the government should put more time into addressing how to minimize civilian casualties, and in the event that a civilian is harmed or killed, the government should address the situation with an investigation instead of denying something ever happened. As Howard put it, quote, "If an investigation is not possible in a given country, then the U.S. drone program there ought to be reconsidered altogether," end quote. Finally, tangible amends should be made through partnership with the local government. These are ideal protocols that will surely point the drone program in the right direction and move us away from the current problems. So for our service project, after concluding that the use of drones to be wrong, we started a petition to spread the word. In addition to this petition, we plan to spread the word by using social media outlets and flyers and posting them around campus. We hope that by gaining attention for the petition, we can gain attention for this issue and encourage others to look into it and observe the pros and cons of the situation. And the petition is an effective way to spread awareness, as it can be accessed by those who have a say in the matter, such as like governors.
Yeah, you can like share the petitions on change.org with like government officials and people who can like do something about it. And then like you can share it like through social media outlets too.
And for the flyers, I believe we plan to put like certain facts of what we found out about drones, in addition to like to spread awareness for it. Thank you.